welcome to the premiere of my newest channel, Nerd Space Horror. First off, if you're watching this on the day of premiere, then thank you. But more importantly, if you're watching this on the day of premiere, then happy April Fool's Day. And with it being April Fool's Day, I can't think of a better topic for today than recent horror movies that completely fooled us. And by recent, I mean within the last 10 years. While classic kills in our favorite horror movies are important, sometimes the thing that scares us the most is the unexpected. So in today's episode, we're looking at the biggest and best twists in horror movies of the last 10 years. Before we get started though, you should know that there will be massive spoilers for every movie on this list. However, there will be timestamps in the description for each entry. At the start of each entry, I'll do a quick summary of what the movie is supposed to be about, so you should have enough time to skip forward to the next entry before I go into any spoiler details. Just be quick about it. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to my channel if you like horror movies, and be sure to leave a like on today's video if you enjoyed today's topic. But with that out of the way, this is Nerd Space with my top 10 horror movie twists of the last decade. Let's get it. Number 10, Get Out. Not only is Jordan Peele a master of horror, but he's also very talented at coming up with some of the best twists. Take Get Out, for example. The movie follows Chris Washington on a weekend getaway to meet his girlfriend's family. The events that follow lead to some of the most shocking reveals in the last 10 years. While at first glance, Chris believes that Rose's family are just a bunch of racists, it's revealed that they are actually part of a cult that has the ability to transfer the human consciousness into other people, and therefore they auction off black people as vessels for white and wealthy buyers. Over time, the family and the cult become obsessed with the physique and beauty of black people and wanted their bodies for themselves. Missy would put the consciousness of the victims into a place known as the sunken place, and her husband, Dean, would perform the transplant that gives the new host control of the victim's body. The twist continues to unravel more as we see that Rose, Chris's girlfriend, is actually in charge of bringing in new potential victims by dating them and bringing them home to her family. The movie explores discrimination and racism in a unique way that only Jordan Peele could fully deliver. Number 9, Sick. Sick is easily one of the best underrated slasher films of the last decade. It plays on the fears and dangers of COVID and then capitalizes on that fear to deliver not only one of the better slasher movies of the last decade, but also a unique twist that shocked most of the viewers. Due to the pandemic, two friends seclude themselves in their isolated family lake house alone and safely away from other people. Or so they thought. Upon arriving at the lake house, strange things begin to happen as they are stalked and attacked by a ruthless killer. Or actually, the first twist reveals that there are multiple killers, not one. But the twist doesn't stop there. The final reveal tells us who these killers are. As it turns out, they are a family of 3 who lost their son to COVID. Seeking revenge on the people responsible for giving their son COVID, the family learned that Parker, the film's main protagonist, actually made out with their son just to make her boyfriend jealous. And it's revealed that Parker was the one that gave their son COVID and they blame her for his death. The twist isn't necessarily mind-blowing, but it's one that plays on current real-world events that resonated with us more than most twists do in horror movies. Number 8, Us. I'll say this again, Jordan Peele loves his twists. Us follows Adelaide, a mother who is suffering from a traumatic event she experienced as a child where she was attacked by someone that looked exactly like her. After returning to her beachfront house with her family years later, Adelaide's worst fears play out as a family that looks exactly like her own family begins to attack them. With a concept like this that involves doppelgangers, pulling the old switcheroo routine on us as a twist isn't enough to completely shock us. Still, Us finds a way to do it nonetheless. Throughout the events of the movie, we follow Adelaide as she battles her doppelganger, Red. After defeating Red, just before the credits, we get another look at a flashback scene that caused Adelaide's trauma. It's revealed that Red did a lot more to Adelaide than we initially thought. While in the funhouse maze, Red actually strangled and damaged Adelaide's vocal cords. Then she dragged her into the place where the rest of the tethered were at and left Adelaide there. Red then assumed Adelaide's place, which means that the Adelaide that we have seen all of this time throughout the entire movie was in fact Red. And the reason why Red could barely speak and had more emotion than the rest of the tethered was because she was actually Adelaide all along. While the switcheroo twist for a movie that played with doppelgangers wasn't exactly that shocking, the fact that our hero was Red since the opening sequence of the movie was enough of a shock to earn it a spot on this list. Number 7, The Invitation. What's the deal with cult movies having some of the best twists? In The Invitation, we follow Will as he returns to his ex-wife's home for a dinner party hosted by her and her husband, David. After learning that they both join a cult to get over past trauma, Will begins to believe that the two have sinister motives for this dinner party. The invitation plays with depression and trauma as throughout the film, the viewer struggles with what is reality and what is just manifested by Will's coping mind with the tragedy of losing his son. So much so that at one point when the movie reveals that someone that Will thought was dead is actually alive and well, you start to doubt if this couple is really up to anything sinister or if Will is going to be the one to break. This is until all hell breaks loose in the third act. The cult members begin killing everybody at the dinner party. Still, this isn't even the twist that helps earn this movie a spot on this list. Earlier in the film, we see David lighting a red lantern and placing it outside. After the final events of the film, the survivors find themselves outside and overlooking homes around them. After seeing multiple homes with the same red lantern followed by the sound of gunshots, screams, and police sirens, it's revealed that this wasn't a contained event, but rather a mass genocide event spanning over an entire town, perhaps even farther than that. Number 6, Goodnight Mommy. Technically, two versions of Goodnight Mommy released in the last decade. The original was an Austrian film, while the 2022 version was an English remake of the 2014 film. While both are very similar in my opinion, the original handled the horror, gore, and twist of the story much better than the remake. Goodnight Mommy follows twin boys as they welcome their mother back home after a reconstructive surgery that requires her to wear bandages that cover her entire face. After the return of their mother, things begin to feel strange and out of place as their mother begins to act differently and more violently than they remember. Over time, the twins, Elias and Lucas, begin to suspect that the person in their home with them is in fact not their mother, which leads to a lot of suspenseful moments that keep you on your toes. The final moments of both films lead to one of the most disturbing reveals in the last decade. As it turns out, one of the twins, Lucas, actually died in an accident prior to the events of the films, meaning that the Lucas that we've been seeing is nothing more than a figment of Elias's imagination. As to how Lucas died, well, that depends on which film you're looking at. While the 2014 version implies that he drowned, the 2022 version clearly states that Elias shot him by mistake in the family barn. The 2014 version does a better job at leading you to believe that the mother isn't who she says she is by having more unsettling and creepy moments with her. Not to mention that the remake allows it to be easier for the viewers to recognize the twist early on, since the mother has conversations with the twins' father throughout the film and clearly never acknowledges Lucas, which makes the twist a little more predictable in the remake versus the original. Number 5, The Boy. On paper, The Boy appears to be yet another possessed doll movie as it follows Greta, a nanny hired to watch over a doll that reminded the parents of their deceased son, Brahms. The parents left a number of rules and guidelines for Greta to follow when watching this doll, like reading to the doll loudly and leaving food out on the table all night for Brahms to eat, despite it being a doll. Eventually, Greta begins breaking these rules, and what follows is moments of terror as the doll appears to be alive and moving on its own. The twist here may disappoint some, but is without a doubt one of the more creative twists in horror movies of this genre. So you were led to believe that the boy died 20 years prior in a fire. Then, when the strange circumstances begin happening, we assume that it's your typical possessed doll movie where the doll is being possessed by the deceased son. As it turns out, that's not the case at all. In the film's final act, we learn that Brahms is actually still alive and has been living in the walls of the home for the past 20 years. And the doll isn't exactly possessed, but rather the real Brahms manipulating the doll to make it appear as though it's possessed. Apparently the parents knew about this, and before they committed suicide, they left a note saying that Greta was a gift from them to their son Brahms. Watching the final moments of the film as a fully grown Brahms wearing a doll-like mask attempts to murder Greta is one of the most disturbing and unique twists I've seen in a horror movie in the last decade. As for the movie sequel, well, we don't really talk about that. Number 4, Malignant. Malignant is a horror movie with one of the most badass fight scenes I've ever seen, which is kind of weird considering that this is a horror movie, but it kind of just goes off the rails in the third act. Anyway, the film follows Madison, a troubled woman with a dark past that begins to have nightmares of other people dying. Over time, she learns that these killings are actually happening, and for some reason, she's able to see the killer commit these murders. If we're talking about twists that will completely shock you, then I promise you that Malignant will definitely give you one that you will never predict. On paper, you would expect a movie like this, with a concept like this, to go one of two ways. Either it will be revealed that Madison is crazy and she's committing the murders herself, or we'll learn that there's some sort of demonic presence involved. At first, we're led to believe that it's the first option, but then when Madison is locked up by the police and interrogated, we start to believe a supernatural being is involved due to the phone call and lights flickering while she's talking to the officers. But let me tell you, it's much more complicated than that. As it turns out, Madison was born with a parasitic twin, Gabriel. What this means is that she and Gabriel were born as conjoined twins, but in a rare extreme circumstance where Gabriel didn't have his own organs, limbs, etc. So instead, he was essentially a tumor or a parasite that preyed on Madison's body. Because of this, Gabriel had control of Madison's mind and body to the point where he could put her to sleep and make her see things that he wanted her to see while he committed the murders using her body. This led to the creepy ass movements that the killer had and the reason why Madison could see each murder happen. It's a lot to try to explain in such a short amount of time, honestly, but just know that the main villain of the film turns out to be a parasitic twin that was forced back into the skull of Madison. Disturbing, right? But hey, we get one hell of a third act in the police station after the reveal. Number 3, Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. Another slasher that is completely underrated and features probably one of the best final acts that I've seen in a slasher movie is Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. The film follows a group of friends stuck in a mansion during a massive hurricane. As the storm gets bad, things take a turn for the worse when one of them turns up dead. The friends begin turning on each other as they try to unravel the mystery of which one of them inside the mansion is the killer. This leads to some gruesome kills, betrayal, and one of the better reveals in a whodunit slasher movie that I've seen in a long time. See, for the most part, a lot of the early kills of the film occur off screen, meaning that we don't actually see people dying, but instead we find their corpses. The other half of the murders occur when people start doubting each other and they begin to fight each other in self-defense. Well, as it turns out, there was never a real killer to begin with. The first death that started the paranoia within the group was actually an accident. David was trying to open a champagne bottle using a sword in which he accidentally slashed his own throat, killing himself. I know, ridiculous way to die. From there, we can paint a picture of how everybody died. Because they thought David was murdered, doubt crept into this already fragile group of friends, and Greg was killed by B when he was defending himself. Then we move over to Emma, who falls and dies in the bathroom after taking too many drugs, and in a fight for the only gun in the house, both Alice and Jordan end up accidentally killed. Only then do the survivors find the phone, which has David trying to open a champagne bottle with a sword on TikTok, but then fails miserably and accidentally kills himself. Bodies, Bodies, Bodies plays with the slasher trope in a way that one wouldn't expect, and when everything is revealed in the final moments of the film, it motivates the viewers to rethink each and every scene of the movie and look at it from a different perspective. Number 2, Orphan, First Kill. The original Orphan movie left us with one of the biggest twists in horror movies, and to be completely honest, if it came out within the last decade, then it would have claimed the number 1 spot over any other movie on today's list. So before I talk more about Orphan's First Kill, it's important to note that I'll be discussing spoilers for the original Orphan movie as well, so you've been warned. Anyway, the first movie ends with a twist that reveals that Esther, the young girl adopted by the Colemans, is in fact not a little girl, but a 33-year-old woman named Lena who is suffering from an illness that gives her the body of a 9-year-old girl. After such a major twist that caught a lot of viewers by surprise in the original movie, it was kind of hard to expect the prequel, Orphan First Kill, to shock us as much as the first movie did, especially considering that we already knew about Esther's big secret going into the prequel movie. Yet, Orphan First Kill still found a way to completely catch us off guard. We follow Lena, Esther's birth name, as she escapes from a psych ward in Estonia and then impersonates a family's missing daughter, Esther, hence how she got the name. As Esther, she begins building a strong relationship with the father while the mother and brother seem unwilling to accept that this is in fact their missing daughter. Well, midway through the film, we get yet another shocking twist from this franchise. Esther, the real Esther, is dead, and as it turns out, the brother was responsible for her death. To make matters worse, the mother knew about this, and in order to protect her son, she hid the body and Esther became a missing person case instead. Meaning from the moment that Lena tried impersonating Esther, both the brother and the mother were aware of her con. The mother allowed the act to go on because of how happy it made her husband to have their daughter back. However, as things take a turn for the worse, we see a final act that pits Esther, aka Lena, against both the brother and the mother. We may have expected some evil deeds and murders from the iconic orphan, Esther, but the reveal of both the mother and the brother being involved in the death of the real Esther was something that completely blew us away. Number 1, The Visit. Sometimes less is more, and that's proven by The Visit claiming the number 1 spot for best twist in a horror movie within the last decade. And considering that The Visit is one of M. Night Shyamalan's movies, then it shouldn't really surprise anyone that the movie will feature some kind of massive twist by the time the credits roll. I mean, this is the same guy that brought us The Sixth Sense, The Village, Signs, and so on. So, as soon as The Visit began, we all knew that he had something waiting for us at the end of the film. Only this was much more simple than one would expect. The visit follows two kids as they visit their maternal grandparents for the first time. Upon arriving, things seem completely off as the grandparents begin acting strange and even disturbing. After a stream of terrifying events that might lead one to expect that the grandparents are possessed, the film throws one of the most chill-inducing lines ever said in a horror movie. Those aren't your grandparents. While the line may not be as iconic as I see dead people, the moment we hear those lines uttered by Becca's mom, we feel a chill shiver down our spine. As it turns out, the people that have been in the house with the children all of this time are in fact patients from the mental hospital that the grandparents worked at. And it's revealed that the actual grandparents were killed by these patients and they took their place as grandparents before the kids arrived. The twist isn't something that's completely out there like some of the ones on this list, but rather something that is simple, realistic, and has one of the best deliveries that was so powerful that it gave us goosebumps. The Visit may not be able to compete with some of M. Night Shyamalan's earlier works like Signs and Sixth Sense, but it definitely outshines any of his later horror movies and deserves the #1 spot for best twist in a horror film of the last decade. But that does it for this episode of Nerd Space Horror. Let me know what you guys think of my list. Honestly, I'm confident that there are plenty of incredible horror movie twists of the last decade that I missed completely, so hit up the comments and let me know which ones do you think that I missed that deserved a spot here. Also, what horror movie of the last decade do you think had the best twist? Do you agree with my #1 choice, The Visit, or do you think another one deserves that title? Let me know down below. Anyway, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to my channel if you like the content that I bring you guys. Also, leave a like on today's video if you enjoyed today's topic. But thanks for watching, and as always, I'll catch you guys on the next episode of Nerd Space Horror. Take care.